Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys football. We're taking a look at some Thursday night action as Utah State, who is off to a brutal start in their 2022 season, goes on the road and plays a team that the boys fell in love with during summer scouting, the BYU Cougars. This is a veteran team. It's a complete team. You look around the country, you don't see that many complete teams with a good offensive line, with wide receivers, with a quarterback who's one of the best in the country, in a defense that at all three levels is very solid, and they play just good, disciplined football. That's been the story for BYU and Coach Itaki during his tenure in Provo, and it's looking like the same this year. Now, before we get into it, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support. Thursday night, it's not an NFL night for the ROC Boys. It is a college football night, and when BYU is playing in Provo, I will be checking this game out. Will it be a competitive game? We'll see. This Utah State team, people forget, won the Mountain West last year. They had one of the most explosive offenses in the country. So far, they're 1-3 to start the season. They haven't looked even close to what they looked like last season. But again, this Utah State team, Logan Bonner's a gunslinger. He can present some threats. I do think BYU rolls. We'll talk about whether they can cover 24 points, but let's get into it. Before we do, I don't even know if we've thanked you guys for all the support you did, but I'll do it again. For real, especially the BYU fans. This is some of the best college football fans in the country. If you guys do like the content, we try to preview every single one of BYU's games. We are big BYU fans. What they do out there in Provo, Utah is very exciting. So if you do like the content, consider subscribing. That supports the fellas a lot. We really do appreciate you guys. Then let us know in the comment section what you guys are thinking. If you have any news on the injuries at wide receiver, let us know. We've been trying to monitor that as close as possible. Let's get into the game. We'll talk about BYU first, just because they're the better football team. If BYU plays to their standard, they will win this game. They probably also cover the points. Start with Jaren Hall. Jaren Hall is a quarterback that just doesn't get talked enough about. I think he's a legit NFL draft pick. Are we talking about the talent level that Zach Wilson has? Probably not, but it's a lot closer than people really are willing to admit. He's a guy that can create outside the pocket, can throw from all sorts of different arm angles, and he's been putting up really, really good numbers without his top two receivers who have been banged up for most of the year. I mean, 103 of 144, 9 touchdowns to 1 interception. He takes care of the football at a really high level, and he's very accurate with the football, again, with not his usual supporting cast. Puka Nacua came back last week. I'm interested if Romney can come back at this point. You might see Romney take one more week off, because we'll get into this more when we're talking about if BYU can cover the 24 points. They're going into their biggest stretch of the season as they play Notre Dame, and I believe it's Las Vegas. And then they also go and play Arkansas at home. Those are two. If BYU wants to make a New Year's Six Bowl, which I think a lot of BYU fans have their eyes on, they got to win both those games, especially with the trip up they had against Oregon, which is not looking like as bad of a loss as people once thought it was. Now, this BYU team, I think they'll establish the run. I mean, Christopher Brooks, the transfer from Cal, was kind of like the Tyler Algier replacement, if you will. And this run game is going to be really good. You look at this offensive line, Blake Freeman, Clark Barrington, Kingsley Sumata transfers from Oregon. There's a lot of talent on this offensive line, and it's an offensive line that we liked a lot coming into the year. And they're running the football fairly well, but enter in a guy like Miles Davis, took over the game for last week for BYU. I mean, they have a really good run game, but again, if they get their dogs back on the outside, this is a team that is very explosive. And you look against who they're going up against in Utah. Talking about Utah's offense, this was, again, one of the best passing offenses in the country last year. Logan Bonner, Devin Tompkins, I believe, was second in the country in receiving yards. He's gone to the NFL. Logan Bonner hasn't looked the same. He threw 5 interceptions against UNLV, and they beat UConn, which is not a very good football team, by 11. Then they lose 55-0 against Alabama, 35-7 against Weber State, and then they lose by 10 to UNLV at home. And this Utah State team is the train is kind of off the tracks here. BYU, I think, is kind of out for some blood, if you will, after that loss against Oregon, where they looked so good the week before against Baylor. I think you're going to see BYU cover the points. They should be like a 30-point favorite. Now, what I'm nervous about, and probably why I'm not going to be laying the points with this BYU team, is they're already banged up enough. Now, if you're winning by 21 in the third quarter, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing the starters get rested. And can BYU's twos beat this Utah State team? Maybe, but I also think you see BYU take the foot off the gas in a big time way where Utah State will be able to kind of get in that backdoor cover. But if BYU plays to their standard, even plays B football, B minus football, they will win by a couple scores. But again, guys that have been banged up, you're playing Notre Dame and then Arkansas the next week. The most important thing for BYU here is not how sexy this game looks, not putting up 60 points. You want to get some rhythm with your ones, get some confidence, and then get out of the game healthy and get ready for probably your two biggest games left on the season in Notre Dame and Arkansas. So are we laying the points? Probably not, but this Utah State team is so bad on offense. They've only averaged 16 points per game playing an FCS team, UConn, and UNLV. I get you played Alabama, you scored 0 points. But the rest of those teams you should be laying 30 on, and they only scored 7 against Weber State and only 24 against UNLV, and they only scored 31 against UConn, which is one of the worst FBS teams in the country. They're allowing 36 points per game. They're getting ran right over. They're allowing passing yards all over them. They're allowing over 400 yards per game of offense, and they're only moving the ball 350 yards per game on average. This Utah State team, when you go back and watch some of their games, they look a shell of themselves, especially on the offense side of the ball. I would be surprised if they scored over 14 points against this Utah State team. When you're thinking about what BYU needs to cover, 35 points, 40 points, I think they can get there. And again, I don't love taking these big spreads just because of the backdoor. You could be right on the game, and then BYU takes all their guys out. They try to slow it down, and Utah State scores a touchdown down 28 to cover. So we're laying off of it, but I want to talk more about this BYU team and maybe just cautioning some of the bettors where you see a low number here. You're probably not going to see the BYU starters for over 3 quarters. I'd be surprised if they're up 21 in the third. I'd be surprised if you see a lot of those guys trot out after that, just because next 2 weeks you got a game up because you're playing Notre Dame and Arkansas, your 2 biggest games of the year. So BYU is going to roll, even if they play C-plus football. But I would probably be cautious about taking the points, and even the over-under at 60. This is a Utah State team that I really don't see scoring over 14 points. So I'm not really loving the over either. If anything, I'm thinking BYU is going to slow this game down, not even try to run up the score, and just get this game over with, get ready for Notre Dame and Arkansas. So if I had a lean in this game, it'd be the under. But this is a game where I'm just sitting back watching Jaren Hall cook, because I'm not watching the NFL. I'm watching BYU and looking how they look and seeing if they get some guys back and getting ready to roll into Notre Dame, getting ready to roll into Arkansas. Keeping it short for you guys here. Appreciate you checking us out as usual. And if you do like the content, especially you BYU fans, we love talking with you guys. We're making it out to Provo at some point. We promise. Got to get out there. It's beautiful out there. We appreciate you guys checking us out, and we'll talk to y'all later.